Hi, AP Environmental Science students. This is a quick review on how to use the finale cache in order to prepare for your finale to the fall term, in which we're going to have some multiple choice questions, but 1 to 2, maybe even 3 free response questions or essays. So this is available in the topics page under Prepare for Exams, and your class will decide on how many of these questions you're going to have, and you're going to decide on which essays are more likely than others. In other words, we'll eliminate a couple of the ones that are just not up to snuff for your interests. So, in looking at what we're going to do here is I want to go over the best practices here for writing these things. They are, I call them essays, but they're really not. They're really free response. And so you'll have these. It'll be something like this. I reserve the right to alter the question a bit, but it could be essentially just like this one. For example, this first question. You get something very similar to this. Probably not going to be exactly like these ones here, but it'll be questions like it. And by you working through these, you will prepare yourself for the final exam. So when you write one of these things, you need to read through the scenarios. You need to answer the questions using evidence to support your answers. And you need to be precise. You need to be focused. You need to do complete sentences, no bullet points, no fragments. It's got to be a real sentence. And then the thing that's different from this in a real essay like with English is there's no need to embellish or to deepen things or to do circular logic. You just get in there. It's what I call street fighting of answers. And so what I mean by that is in a street fight, you don't take turns hitting each other. You go in for the kill. You go in to end it and move on. And so similar with this is you're going to hit me with the facts and then you're going to move on. So let's take a look at some of these real quick. So this first one is a diagram of a hypothetical food web found in an estuary. If you don't know what an estuary is, this might be the time to review that type of environment. A lot of you live near estuaries or have walked through estuaries, so I'm assuming you understand what it is. And you see the food web. You probably recognize a lot of these things. They're in here. The east part is supposed to be geese. It's cut off. But the questions, now you essentially just answer the questions. And you should do them in order, and you should label them A, B, and C. So, the first question is describe 2 abiotic factors of the aquatic component of this estuary that change twice daily. So 2 abiotic factors. So remember what abiotic means? And an estuary is on the coast, right? So there's some natural changes that happen daily. And so you should be able to figure this one out, right? 2 abiotic changes. One of the things that we know at an ocean or coastal thing is there's going to be all sorts of changes that happen due to the sunshine. There's changes that are due to sea level, where it is and where it isn't. We have a lot of different abiotic changes that happen over the course of a day in any environment, let alone one that is on the coast. Then the next question is draw an energy pyramid based on the food web that's given here. And so for each trophic level, you have to do 2 examples of the organisms that would occupy that level. And so going through these things, you can work on this with a friend and try to figure this out. And we may work on a couple of these in class. The last one is cultural eutrophication. This term we are talking about in class this week. It's one of the last things we talk about. It's the big problem. And you should be able to answer this. If it's not going to be in an essay like this, it'll be as multiple choice. So that's one of the possible questions. And so you would decide as a group for your class, yes, we love this one. No way, we hate it. And I'll mark it that way. And so we'll winnow it down to a couple of these. These next 2 are all about biodiversity. They essentially ask very similar questions. And so what you want to do is we want to review these things and think about the terminology. Notice in this one we have things that say describe, we have things that say identify, we have propose and explain. These are really key action words, and not every question is going to have stuff like that highlighted. I'll do my best to maybe highlight them, but when you're asked to do that, that means you need to provide some evidence that answers the question. So let's do B here. Identify two specific human activities that result in the loss of biodiversity and explain how each activity lowers that biodiversity. Well, we know that HIPPO is a good acronym to remember a lot of human activities that are accelerating extinction and loss of biodiversity. So you have to be specific. And so you think about your animal in this case. What are two things that humans are doing? Very specific. You can't say they hunt. You need to be specific about the hunting. If you say they destroy habitat, that's too general. It needs to be specific. You need to show off that you know what you're talking about. And then you want to explain a bit, like give some details about how it may lower diversity. So let's use the example that I'm going to have. Let's say I represent a cliff swallow. Cliff swallow likes to nest on the sides of buildings or on cliffs and in banks on high rocky faces, and they're really good at that. And one of the ways that we're losing cliff swallows is we're destroying those nesting sites either through agriculture or destruction of the environment by altering it to an urban environment. And then I can explain how those each work. By destroying nesting sites, that means there's less chance or more competition between the species, intra-specific competition for nesting sites, which increases stress and competition, but does not increase population as well as if there were multiple or more choices for nest sites. So that increased stress and that increased competition or limiting factor weighs heavier on the population. So that's an example, right? So looking through these, if you take a moment to look through these and breathe through it, you know these. These are good questions for you. You would win on this, but you're not going to win if you don't think about preparing these and writing some of these answers out in advance. Let's take a look. This is about zebra mussels. And so in this one, this is straight out of an AP exam. So they give you a scenario about zebra mussels, and then they ask you some pretty pointed questions. Some of them are relatively easy. Why are the zebra mussels located primarily in areas of eastern United States? Remember, east as well. Actually, probably more like this, right? There's Louisiana. Why is it more to the east rather than west? Well, this requires a little bit of thinking. This doesn't require you to necessarily know all the details about zebra mussels, but for you to look at a map and think about geography. Then it starts asking these questions. Again, these are ones that you should think about and try. Describe one viable method for preventing zebra mussels into isolated lakes. Well, a lot of you experience lake life a lot and know the answer to this one. How do we stop it? What is the best way to prevent invasive species? This could be a viable method. And this one, it gets pretty specific too. Identify and explain what impact that they have on aquatic systems. Remember, ecosystems. It's not asking about what it does to people, right? We're talking about the ecosystem. So it needs to be about the abiotic and biotic balance, how it messes with that. Pick one of them. Then you can look at some other invasive species. You can look at ways of control. All of these were discussed in the chapter. Even though we didn't discuss it at great length in class, you should still understand how to do this. And if you don't, that's where you have a greater conversation with your classmates and or me. 2 specific characteristics that enable them to thrive in new environments. We did those in notes. So this is a winner one as well. You could totally kill on this. Next one, another invasive species question. This time is cane toad. We didn't study cane toads. We didn't read much about them. We talked about them, but that doesn't mean you understand them. But it has a lot of the same questions as before. 2 characteristics of an introduced, and in this case the same thing it means invasive. I totally misspelled invasive. Oh my God. What are the 2 characteristics? 2 adaptations that allow them to gain a competitive advantage, right? These might be the same answers. You can repeat yourself. Discuss a strategy. How do you stop them? That doesn't take a lot of work. You could probably figure that one out. Name another introduced species. Almost the same set of questions as a zebra mussel. So some of these are doubles for good reason. Here's one that I really like, and I'll have, it's probably guaranteed I'll have something like this, but it won't be this exact question. But it'll involve a map where it shows a stream, a boundary of some sort of activity like a farm, and testing sites along the way, and then the data chart for that testing site. We did this. This is the real science that we learned this term. Maybe you didn't get the best grade that you hoped for on it, but you understand the method and understand how to discern if this is good or bad. So for example, this one, it says, what's the likelihood that animal waste is contaminating the water? Well, what would be the big clue for that? Well, we've been talking about the really bad thing called eutrophic events. We talk about that in class. That would be the worst case scenario. So what leads to a eutrophic event? Well, we have to think about the source. And if we look at our data in here, you can easily see where the eutrophic event happens. And you can see that there's evidence that supports this. And so you have to use it in your answer. They ask also to describe 2 additional tests that you could use to see how the water quality is doing. You did a bunch. Even if they didn't go that well. If they were a fail, you still know some good ones to try. And then this is eutrophication. You just have to describe it. And then this is a twist I've often used, is if this river watershed was near your habitat range, it makes it difficult for maybe sharks and totally aquatic species. But if you think about this pollution going into a bay where your food or nesting or breeding area is, or whatever, if it's going into somewhere that's sensitive, and you have to take some assumptions like it's going to affect you, then what are some likely problems that would impact your species you represent? So you have to allow this scenario to exist in the biome habitat that your species that you represent is in. All right, let's move on. Number 7. This is an interesting one. This even has all the directions from the AP stuff. I took this one from an AP exam as well. And so this is a lot of blah 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 in it, but it's basically telling you what the birds are. There's a bird. It tells you that they're threatened with extinction, and it tests their preference and the issue that's going on at this site in Assateague Island, Virginia, a real place and a real problem. And so then, it looks all daunting, right? It looks scary. But then when you start looking at the questions, it's not that scary. Identify the preferred nesting habitat for piping plovers. Well, it's in here. Plovers prefer, blah, 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 blah. It's already there. So a lot of the stuff, you just have to make sure you read carefully. Describe the change in number of piping plover nests between 1999 and 2009. So that is indicated here in the map. And you can see the nesting sites based on the legend. You can get a good idea. And then you can describe one likely reason because, again, there's some answers up here. And there's some answers in here as well. Okay? And lastly, then you go to this next part of the question, describe a restriction that would help. Then, besides providing additional habitat for them, explain why features like barrier islands might preserve and protect the environment in a coastal region. Part of this seems hard, but if you think about it in terms of our major problem, which comes up again and again right there, I wrote it in there, I bet you can figure out how this helps. And the last one in here is identify human action that directly threatens coastal habitats, and then describe one impact on species other than a pipe and plover that use a coastal habitat. And there's plenty of your colleagues that represent coastal species. Everything from penguins to seals to more, even more. So it's just a matter of asking the question. A doable one, a little harder than the other. Again, all the secret of this is practicing and looking at it. This is probably going to be the scariest one of them all. But this is the one you should definitely practice, because if you can practice answering these things here, if you can get these answers for this question, then you're prepping for the rest of the exam if it's multiple choice or not. Because geochemical cycles is definitely the newest thing that we worked on, and there's some terminology in there that is difficult. So I would spend some serious time here, and we will do so in class as well. Last one is about the wetlands here. The wetlands is pretty easy. Taking a look at it, what are two characteristics that define an area as a wetland? You can look that up. It's really easy. Some of it's logical stuff, but make sure you look it up so you're not guessing, but you're sure. Complete the diagram of a wetland food web by drawing arrows to show the direction of energy flow. Some of these things you could probably guess at, but you want to make sure that you have it right. And then, so if we were to do this, that most of the, that this is going to happen here. This is going to go here. This is going to go here. This is going to go here. It's likely to do that. Eagle is not going to be eating snails and algae. So why does it take so many acres? This goes back to this issue and a law of thermodynamics. Okay, what are some things, economic benefits? The water quality that wetlands provide. This is an ecosystem services question. Ecosystem services, there'll definitely be questions on the exam about them, so you might as well look at a specific one like wetlands. And then describe an activity that degrades wetlands. You have to describe it, right? You're not going to give one word, like rollerblading. That doesn't describe anything. How does it degrade wetlands? Oh, it's the best rollerblading areas in the world are along flat areas that are provided by wetlands. I'm making this up, right? I don't really know about rollerblading. I don't know why that thought came into my head. I'm just silly. But rollerblading, so that's specific, but you need to know what you're talking about. So you got to do your homework. So the key, again, going back to all this stuff, the key to this is that I've given this to you in advance to study and to work on, to build from. If you try these out, it'll build your confidence and get you closer to being ready for the exam. Plus, we're going to pick one or two of these to be on the exam, or a version of it, not the exact wording. I'm going to add or take away or do something that's similar to it, but not exactly like it. But you should be prepped. You should be able to hit the ball and really get a lot of good bases off of it, if you know what I mean. Okay, so there you go. There you go. I think if you use this, you're going to be good. All right. Let's keep the conversation going. Best of luck.